Thank you, Ben, for doing this. And obviously everybody else, I think, shares the appreciation for the movie that I have. And congratulations. It's a big accomplishment.
Thank you. Thanks. Absolutely. Thank you very much. And it's great to be able to play the movie here with on a big screen for a big audience. So on a Sunday.
Terrific.
It's nice.
Well, I guess the first question that might occur, particularly to AARP members who might remember the earlier versions of Walter Mitty. Some cases we have the original, I guess, the Thurber 1939 New Yorker short story. We have the Danny Kaye 47 movie. When did you first encounter the story, and what appealed to you about it?
First of all, is everybody here in the AARP? There seem to be some not retired people here. I'm heading for AARP. I'm a couple of years away. And I'm excited. Yeah. They start getting to you early.
The product of...
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I know. I got a couple of years. So, yeah, I mean, for me, the short story I'd read as a kid, I had seen the Danny Kaye movie also as a kid, but I'd gotten sent a script that was a remake of the Danny Kaye movie about 8 or 9 years ago that I didn't want to do as an actor because I felt like you couldn't really improve upon that. It's a classic musical comedy, and that genre I think was done better then than it is now, and doing a remake without music just didn't seem like it would make sense. And then Steve Conrad, who wrote the script, took this other approach to the story that, for me, related a lot more to the original short story. And in terms of the tone and sort of the idea of this, this sort of noble hero inside of this regular guy that exists only in his head. And I felt like that was a very relatable thing, and I just love what he did with the script, so that's why I wanted to get on board.
And just, do you have a particular fascination with sort of, I guess, in the way that you read a 1939 short story as a kid, with history, with, I remember reading at one time you were looking at possibly making What Makes Sammy Run into a movie, and obviously you have two parents, AARP members, who, have been doing great work for a long time. And I just wonder where, do you find that you maybe are more responsive to material of earlier origins than other people might be?
Maybe. I mean, maybe it's my age, maybe it's where I come from, or my upbringing. But, I grew up in New York, definitely in a show business family. But I think the great thing about growing up in the city was, we were exposed to a lot of different culture, and, and just the city itself. I mean, just living in New York in the 70s was just such a different experience than it is now. And yeah, I remember, reading Thurber or reading even E.B. White, writers of that era who, E.B. White has a short story called The Second Tree from the Corner. It reminds me of the Mitty story too. It's about a guy who's riding home on the bus after his, psychiatrist appointment and kind of musing about his life. And there's like a certain tone to those stories to me that's very, like I said, melancholy, kind of emotional, but also recalls a certain era in New York that I love. I love the history of New York. I love the history of movies. I love history of LA. I'm drawn to that. So, I felt like there was an opportunity in this movie to somehow connect with that, even though it was, it's a modern day story. I wanted it to have some sort of connection with that feeling.
Mm-hmm. So, Steve Conrad is somebody that you had, I guess, tried to work on another project with before this one even happened. How did it work out that he was the guy to partner with on this one? And was it something that you always felt was something you'd want to direct, or was there ever, well, let me leave it at that.
Okay. Yeah, well, I had worked with Steve on a script that he wrote that we developed for a while called The Parking Ticket, which is a great script that hasn't been made, that he just came up with this idea of it was actually a script that he rewrote. It wasn't his original idea, but he wrote a great version of this story that it's about a guy who gets a parking ticket, decides to fight it, and ends up on death row. And that's the one line on that movie. And And he has a tone about what he writes, and what, you know, he has humor. There's but yet there's, like, similar to me, for me, to the Thurber style. There's emotion underneath it, and he really is drawn to the idea of the regular guy and sort of the heroic nature of what, you know, of what is inside of people that they don't get to express in everyday life. That we all have. And so I had been wanting to work with him for a long time, and then I read the script. Coincidentally, I hadn't developed it with him. And then we got together and we spent about 9 months, you know, sort of working on drafts, and then slowly sort of worked our way up towards sort of pre-producing the movie as the studio sort of inched towards, you know, possibly saying yes, which, so that went on for a while too.
Well, and that leads into the next question, I guess, which is that you have certainly, I mean, next year will mark the 20th anniversary of the first time you directed a movie, Reality Bites. In the interim, we've had Cable Guy, we've had Zoolander, we've had Tropic Thunder. I mean, these are very popular, well-liked, well-received movies, but I don't think any of them you could say were
some of them well received.
More than others, maybe. But I mean, are these? None of them could have been anywhere near the scale of a project or of an undertaking as this one was, were they?
No, I mean, Tropic Thunder had its own challenges because we were, you know, doing a sort of, you know, pseudo-war movie that, and that, you know, it had that. But this movie had so many different things within it. And I think, you know, honestly, the biggest challenge for me on this movie was trying to translate what I felt Steve had written on the page, which was for me, a very specific feeling. And ultimately, I've learned it on other movies that, you know, sometimes the bigger stuff, or you know, in terms of just logistical challenges, when you're making a movie, even those are the bigger sort of real life challenges when you're doing it. Those are not necessarily as important in terms of what makes the movie work or doesn't work, so or won't work. So that was something I was kind of aware of going into this, and I felt like there were really fun things to do in terms of these sequences and these big, you know, adventure sequences we got to do. But then ultimately, I felt like the biggest challenge was really just being able to have the story, you know, the character story work its way through all that. And that was a challenge, I think, through developing the script, through shooting the movie, and then ultimately through editing, as we tried to figure out the balance of Walter's fantasy life to real life, and how to keep that through line going throughout the movie.
And you surrounded yourself on this project with some pretty terrific and eclectic group of people. For everyone, I guess, from Shirley MacLaine to you know, some guys who I'm sure you had some laughs with, whether it's Adam Scott or Patton Oswalt or certainly Kristen Wiig. And I just wonder, was the casting process, especially with such a large cast, you know, sort of a huge undertaking in and of itself, or did you know, sort of as you developed this with Steve, who you wanted for these parts?
It was some. You know, I think casting is incredibly important in a movie, and any movie, and that process is sort of this. You know, sometimes there's a part that you just go, I know I want it to be this person, and I felt that with a few of the roles in the movie. Sean Penn, Shirley MacLaine, Adam Scott, Kristen. Those were actually all pretty much, you know, the first choice. And the other casting in the movie was interesting for me because I got to work with actors I'd never worked with before and meet actors I hadn't met before. When we went to, I had a great casting director named Rachel Tenner who went to Greenland. She went to Iceland. We eventually went to Iceland together and cast a lot of roles out of Iceland. She went to Denmark. She went all over the place to try to find these, you know, to fill these roles. And that was really fun to just be in a different, you know, area, and then to work with people I've worked with before. You know, Patton Oswalt and I have been friends for probably, you know, 20 years, and I mean, he's in Zoolander for a second, and we just, you know, we have a long history together, so that was fun. But, you know, to work with Shirley and Sean, these are people who are iconic as actors that we recognize, but in terms of their process and what, you know, the talent that they have, it's pretty amazing to actually get to, you know, interact with them as an actor, to be a director there for them, and I felt really lucky to have that experience.
I think you are obviously very, very closely associated with the comedy genre for well-deserved reasons, but I gathered from other interviews and things that where you've said that a part of you has always sort of been particularly drawn to drama and a desire to, sometimes life just takes you in a certain direction. But with this, while it's got very funny moments, I think it would certainly qualify as a dramedy, and in many cases it's very serious drama. And so is that something, do you sort of feel a hunger for doing more dramatic things and maybe, not being in a way restricted to comedic stuff?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Definitely as a director and as an actor too. But I think just the nature of what we do, being an actor, what you do is much more. The roles you play relate to who you are, to the age you are, to how you look, what you sound like, how your personality. And certain actors are very malleable, and other actors, myself included, I'd say I feel like I'm not going to be playing Lincoln in Lincoln 2. But I feel like as a director, I guess what I'm trying to say is as a director, there's so much more, I feel much more freedom in terms of there's just so many different kinds of movies to make that aren't limited by who I am as an actor. So for me personally, so I really look forward to that and definitely to not directing myself as an actor too.
And directing versus acting, is it something that do you have at this point in life a preference of one or the other? Could you ever see yourself focusing entirely on one or the other?
Yeah, I definitely could see myself just directing for sure. In fact, I feel like that's sort of what will end up happening as the roles dry up. It's all sort of dictated by, I think, the opportunities that are out there and the ones you want to pursue yourself. But for me, I'm very happy. The days that on Mitty, there weren't a lot of days when I wasn't acting and directing. But on Tropic Thunder, like the days that I wasn't acting were my favorite days because I got to just be there and stand behind the monitor and to work with the actors. And there's a camaraderie that happens when you're acting and directing with the other actors and the crew, where you kind of all get together and you say, look, this is going to be a different process. We're going to have to, it's not the traditional director saying action, cut, or I'm in there with you guys. And you end up relying on your fellow actors a lot and other crew too, because you're in it. And I enjoy that part of it too. But ultimately, I think for me, to just be directing would be that's where I'd love to end up.
And just a last question from me before we turn to the audience. Something as you said earlier clearly resonated with you about the story and its various incarnations up till now. What do you hope somebody who may not have been acquainted with the earlier versions, who comes to see your film, will come away from it thinking or feeling differently? What is the reason that you kind of chose this story for people?
Well, for me, it was when I read the script, and I read the last paragraph that Steve wrote, which I think he wrote really eloquently in the script. And when Walter looks at sees the magazine cover and he sees this, simple picture of himself doing the work, it moved me. I felt something, and I was hoping that feeling that hopefully an audience when they see the movie would somehow leave the theater feeling something, feeling something. I don't ever want to dictate, what they should feel, but to me, there was something in this journey that he goes on to me that related personally, that I connect with personally, and I would hope that the audience could feel something when they leave.
Well, we'll hear from them right now. So let's take a few questions, and I believe we have a mic over here, and we're gonna have just have you line up if you have a question, and we'll start with this gentleman.
Hi, Ben.
Hello.
My name is Steven.
Hey.
I just wanted to know the challenges of directing and acting, if you have any tips for those who want to pursue that as well.
The challenges of directing and acting. It's well, it can be great and frustrating. I find it more of the time I'm frustrated with myself. You know, I mean, I think you have to be easy on yourself. That's like take it easy on yourself. That's my big sort of lesson that I've learned, I think, over the years, is that as an actor, ultimately, you know, you have to get the best performance you can out of yourself. As a director, you have to get it out of the actor, and that can be confusing sometimes, how to do that, because you're looking for guidance, and, you know, most of the time I'm wishing I had a director there telling me, you know, if it was good or not, or giving me some guidance, and it's not there. So you have to sort of, I give myself as much leeway as possible, especially the last few times out. I try to like do more takes than I would normally do, so that I can sort of almost bracket things and give myself as much to work with in the editing room as possible. But ultimately, it's just frustrating because you want to be two places at once. And I think the other thing I would say is just to be incredibly aware of how much your other actors need you there as a director. I think it's very easy to fall into the trap of, when you're doing scenes that you're in and you're trying to worry about your own performance, you know, that you have to be aware that the other actors are there in the scene and are looking for guidance too as a director. So for me, it just comes down to, like, I prep as much as possible, spend as many days and weeks and months getting ready for the day we shoot, so that on the day that we shoot, I can devote as much to the actors, including myself, as possible.
Hi, Ben.
Hi.
I'm Sharon. The film was fantastic.
Thank you.
I always love how you take a character that is like an underdog or a nerd or whatever, and then you seem to surpass everything and really touch the audience with so much, just so much great emotion. It's wonderful. But my question is there, you've done so many great films, is there one particular one that's special to you? And if so, why is that more special?
Oh, well, I don't know. I mean, you know, a lot of times the movie itself is maybe, in terms of like what's special, I guess maybe I would think of two questions there, but like, what, a movie that's special, that I love the movie or feel connected to the movie?
One of your films
right.
that you've been in that, you know, you feel like that one is like your special film. I mean, I know you're going to do many more great films to come, but...
Right. Okay, good. No, thank you. I'm glad you believe in me. No, I mean, I was thinking, like, you know, there are experiences I remember of having an incredible experience where the movie was, where I know that I wasn't that great in the movie. In particular, there's like the second movie I ever was in, I had a sort of a secondary role in this movie called Fresh Horses with Andrew McCarthy and Molly Ringwald in like 1987, I think. And that was one of the best experiences I ever had in a movie. I suck in the movie. I am horrible. I'm like literally like, it's like I'm on drugs or something. I'm like I'm just doing way too much, and it's horrible. But the experience of making the movie is one of the best experiences I ever had. It's the first time I ever got to go on location. This director, David Onspa, was really nice. He directed Hoosiers, and he hired me in this movie. And it was just an incredible, fun fall that we spent in Kentucky and Ohio in 1987, and I'll always remember it. In terms of like movies that I feel, you know, proud of or connected to, there's a movie called Permanent Midnight that was a really good experience that I had also a long time ago, and I became very good friends with Jerry Stahl, the guy I played in the movie, who we're still sort of best friends to this day. And so that's one that I feel good, and I love Zoolander too, because I feel like. Thank you. Hey, thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks. You're
Hi,
definitely
Ben.
not retired. Okay.
No. I loved you in Avatar, by the way.
Thank you.
I just wanted to commend you. I happen to be a huge, though I'm not in AARP, I saw the Danny Kaye version years ago as a kid. My dad was like, you have to watch this. And I love that movie. And at first I was skeptical when I saw this a few months ago, the trailer for it. I was like, oh man, that's like one of my favorite movies. But I think you did a visually dynamic film, an emotionally engaging story, and I think it was beautiful. So I just wanted to say that. I have a two-part question. I'm curious about frame 25, because it seems like the whole movie, it was set up that frame 25 possibly wasn't going to get shown in the end. Was there ever a point with the story that you were sitting there debating whether or not to show it and give us that emotional satisfaction, or not show it and let it be in our imagination and crave that desire of wanting to see it? And then the second part of my question is, can I shake your hand after the answer?
Part two, no. I'll shake your hand. Thank you so much. No, you know, I honestly am. I have to say, I'm not. Maybe I'm not bold enough as a filmmaker to ever have considered not showing it. You know, because I think that would be a pretty bold move too, or never even tested the movie that way. Or you know, maybe it's also because when I read the script, that hit me so hard when I read the script that you know, I couldn't imagine not putting it in. There was one point when I considered. And we never even tried it in editing, but I considered like maybe not showing it right then at that moment, and showing it after they walk away from it. And my editor, Greg, convinced me that wasn't a good idea, so we didn't do it.
Thanks. All right, thanks.
Obviously, I'm not in AARP.
You should be like in the American Association for Young People.
Yes.
Yeah. I think, you know, the film, for me, it really spoke to me, and I think, like, that's a wonderful experience, you know, when the film speaks to you, or, you know, I guess any form of art, and, you know, especially being the director and acting in the film, what did you personally take from, you know, now that the project's done?
Well, it's been an incredible experience for me making the movie, because I've spent pretty much like the last 3 years of my life working on it, and it's been a gift to me to have something that I've felt that connected to engage in for that long, you know, to have this experience with it, from the relationships and friendships that I've had that have come out of making the movie, people I met, people in Iceland who I didn't know before, who I'm friends with now, and the working experience I had with people I've worked with, like Greg, my editor, and Jeff Mann, our production designer, who are good friends of mine who I've worked on other movies with, but we grew closer. And honestly, to have an experience of making something that for me was a different experience as a director, because I never had a different criteria in which to mold the movie. In comedies, I always look at them as real movies. You know, the other movies I've directed, even, you know, Zoolander, yes, they're broad and silly, but there's always a reality level to them that I feel that you have to be consistent with and treat the characters as real people, as crazy or ridiculous as they are. And this one, you know, but ultimately those movies, when you put them in front of an audience, you know, they're coming to see a comedy. And this movie, I didn't know exactly what genre it would fall into, or if it would fall into a specific one. But in starting to put the movie in front of people, I realized early on that the comedy and the laughs, which we're used to judging the movie by, were not the way to judge the film in terms of, you know, how the audience was engaging with it. And it had this other engagement, which was the story and the character. And that was really a great experience for me to have as a director. I think it's a really great learning experience. And I look forward to doing that more in the future, and having, you know, but I also like comedies. I don't think movies have to be categorized every time. So.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
And also, thank you for being the only actor who's 5'7", because I was like,
yes,
I'm like the only short person who's.
Because Dustin Hoffman's like 5'6", so.
Thank you.
And Tom,
he makes me feel good.
Tom Cruise isn't much taller, right?
He's taller than you think.
Is he? Okay.
Hi. I was wondering about the music, how you dealt with that. I work in that kind of area of filmmaking. So the score versus the needle drops, kind of how you balance them, because the needle drops really did have a lot of impact.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, the way that I start out is I put together, I have a friend of mine who I've also worked with for a long time named George Draculius, who's a great music producer, and I've known him for about probably over 20 years, and a music supervisor. So we put together a playlist of songs at the beginning of the process, that music that sort of feels like the movie, and for me that's really important. Like it gets me going, and it'll be big, like maybe like 200 or 300 songs, and then we'll start to sort of hone it down. And then by the time we got to shooting, we had about 30 songs that we really liked. and I gave everybody on the crew and the cast a thumb drive with the songs, just to let them know the vibe. We played it on the set a lot, which is something that I think is a great thing, to just give a feeling when you're working. And then when we started to edit the movie, I knew Theodore Shapiro was going to do the score, who I'd worked with before, and he's a really, I feel, very, very special composer. And we talked a lot about the music the songs that I'd chosen. And he listened to that, and we also knew we wanted to have an orchestral score, but there was an element that I wanted to have, which was Walter's voice, and to feel that there was a consistent voice throughout the movie. And as we listened to different songs, there was this one guy named Jose Gonzalez that I really, really liked. What he recorded this cover of the song called Teardrop by Massive Attack. And I heard it on iTunes. I was, this is incredible. And started to listen to more of his music. And so when we started to edit the movie, I got in touch with him. He lives in Sweden. And I asked him to come and take a look at a rough cut of the movie. And he came to my house, and we watched the movie, and we talked about it. And he said, yeah, I'd be into, trying some stuff. So him and Teddy got together, and they started to work on Teddy's score, and he started to hum Teddy's score. And what we did was we ended up putting his voice throughout the movie, having him hum the score along with the orchestra. And then he has a band called Junip, and we used a couple of their songs. And what I tried to do as we went through editing was to just hone it more and more, so there were less and less different songs in the movie. However, there are 2 or 3 songs that are just their own thing. But the majority of music is, and the ones that aren't the score are Jose. And that, to me, was just like, it's sort of like a slow sort of honing process.
Yeah, I saw his name there. That's cool.
Yeah, no, he's amazing. He's got an incredible voice. And every time he sings something, it makes it so special, I think.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you guys for coming so much. Obviously, it felt like the movie had some pretty big things to say about life and how we live it. So I was just wondering how you balance that to make sure those big emotional beats came off as honest and true and not overly sentimental or too saccharine.
I think it's a very personal thing, and it's a good question, I think. Again, this was new territory for me in that way, and because I'm used to, making movies that probably are probably more cynical in that, in terms of, they're satiric. And this, for me, was, it was scary sometimes, because I was like, wow, is this too much? And it's like just a conversation that ultimately you have with yourself. And I love Teddy's music, and I feel like sometimes music can take things in a direction. I feel like everybody has a personal reaction to music and scoring of movies. And I love a moment in a movie where something really emotional can happen and there's no music. But I also love moments in movies that music contributes to that. And then there's that point where you go, well, when is the music cheating it or whatever? And I think that's a personal decision that you have with yourself. And I think everybody's going to always have their own opinion. But I just kind of went from what I felt inside. And, ultimately, I loved Teddy's music. I loved his score. The theme that he came up with for Walter, to me, was really just indicative of this guy who had all this stuff going on inside of him, this sort of a nobility to it that this regular guy deserved, even though the whole world wasn't seeing it. So I very honestly, I fell in love with that score, and it moved me when I would listen to it. And so I tried to just kind of judge from my own thing, and then at a certain point you go, all right, I'm just going to go with this because I've taken a shot, and this is what I feel.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
So, I guess I just want to acknowledge before we say goodbye that this is really, as we said, coming up on 20 years of directing. This is the 5th feature. To their credit, the Film Society of Lincoln Center is about to acknowledge that with a retrospective. It's a kind of a big milestone for you, as you say, 3 years in the making, and on behalf of myself, on behalf of AARP, on behalf of the imposter folks here who are not AARP members, thank you so much for doing this, and congratulations. Really
Thanks, Scott. Thank you, man.
Really appreciate it.